The hotel receipt fell out of Julia's purse like a confession written in expensive ink. $400 for one night at the Fairmont, dated last Tuesday when she'd told me she was visiting her sick aunt in Milwaukee. I stared at the paper, my coffee growing cold in the cramped kitchen of our Lincoln Park condo, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. My name is Mark Kessler, and I'm 43 years old. I adjust insurance claims for a living, which means I'm professionally trained to spot lies, inconsistencies, and fraud. It's a skill that pays the bills, and apparently one that was about to save my marriage from continuing to be the biggest lie of all. Julia Kessler, née Steinberg, is my wife of 8 years. She's 39, works in public relations for a firm that represents Chicago's elite, and has always been too good for me. At least, that's what her parents have been telling me since we met. Dr. Harold Steinberg and his wife Margaret never missed an opportunity to remind me that their daughter could have married a surgeon, a lawyer, or at minimum, someone who didn't smell like other people's disasters for a living. But Julia had chosen me, or so I thought. We met at a coffee shop in River North where she was meeting a client and I was grabbing lunch between claim inspections. She was everything I wasn't: polished, confident, connected to a world of wine tastings and charity galas that I navigated like a tourist in an expensive museum. I was the guy who knew which restaurants had the best burgers under $10 and could tell you exactly how much your car was worth after someone rear-ended you at a stoplight. "You're refreshingly honest," she'd told me on our third date. Everyone in my world lies about everything. The irony wasn't lost on me now as I held the hotel receipt between my fingers like evidence in a case I never wanted to investigate. The handwritten note attached to the receipt was what really got my attention. "Next time, bring the silk ties we talked about. The rough ones left marks. B." I'm not a violent man, but I felt something dark and cold settle in my stomach as I read those words. Julia had been distant for months, working late, taking mysterious phone calls that she'd end abruptly when I walked into the room. I'd chalked it up to work stress, maybe some midlife restlessness. I'd even suggested couples therapy, which she'd dismissed with a laugh that now seemed cruel in retrospect. "Mark, we're fine. You worry too much, but we weren't fine, and I wasn't worrying enough." I photographed the receipt with my phone and put it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat at our kitchen table and did what I do best. I started building a case. The next morning, Julia kissed me goodbye like she had every morning for 8 years, her lips tasting like the expensive lipstick she wore to impress clients. She was wearing a new perfume, something heavier and more sensual than her usual scent. "I'll be late tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Big client dinner." "Which client?" "Blake Hammond's development project. The one in River North, Blake Hammond, the name on the hotel receipt." I nodded and smiled, watching my wife lie to my face with the same professional ease she used to spin stories for her clients. "Have fun," I said. After she left, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. My supervisor, Raj Patel, had been my partner in the claims department for 5 years and knew me well enough to be concerned. "You never get sick, man." "What's wrong?" "Personal stuff. I'll fill you in later." Julia problems? Raj had never liked Julia. He'd been polite at company parties and friendly enough when she joined us for drinks, but he'd made comments over the years that I'd dismissed as jealousy. Raj was divorced, bitter about his ex-wife's alimony demands, and I'd assumed he was projecting his own marital failures onto my relationship. "Maybe," I admitted. "You need backup. You call me. I know people. I spent the day doing research." Blake Hammond owned Hammond Development, a company that specialized in luxury condominiums and commercial properties throughout Chicago. He was 45, divorced, and according to his company's website, a major donor to several charities that Julia's firm represented. His LinkedIn profile showed him at various industry events, including 3 where Julia appeared in the background of photos, always perfectly positioned to be noticed. I also discovered that Blake Hammond lived in a penthouse apartment 6 blocks from the Fairmont Hotel. That evening, I followed Julia. She left her office at 7:30, just as she'd said she would, but instead of heading to a restaurant, she drove directly to Blake Hammond's building. I parked across the street and watched her walk through the lobby like she owned the place, her heels clicking against marble floors that probably cost more than my annual salary. I waited 3 hours. When Julia finally emerged, her hair was different, her makeup smudged in a way that told me everything I needed to know. She checked her reflection in the lobby's mirrored walls, fixing her lipstick and smoothing her dress before walking to her car. I followed her home, arriving 5 minutes after she did. "How was dinner?" I asked when she walked through the door. "Exhausting. Blake is demanding, but the account is worth it." She went straight to the shower. When she came out, she was wearing a silk nightgown I'd never seen before, black with lace trim that looked expensive and new. "That's pretty," I said. "This old thing? I've had it forever." Another lie. I was keeping count now. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. Julia's late nights coincided perfectly with Blake Hammond's social media posts about working dinners and client entertainment. I found credit card charges for lingerie stores, expensive restaurants, and another hotel, this time the Peninsula, where they'd apparently graduated from afternoon encounters to overnight stays. I also started liquidating assets. One advantage of working in insurance is understanding how quickly financial situations can change and how important it is to protect yourself before disaster strikes. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, slowly transferring money from our joint savings. I contacted a real estate agent about selling our condo, claiming Julia and I were looking to downsize. I even started researching apartments in other neighborhoods, places where I could start over if necessary. But I wasn't planning to run away. I was planning something much more satisfying. The opportunity came on a Thursday evening when Julia announced she was going to a girls' night with her friends Tara and Monica, 2 women who'd been encouraging her increasingly frequent nights out over the past few months. "We're going to that new wine bar in Lincoln Park," she said, applying lipstick in our bedroom mirror. "Don't wait up." I knew she was lying because Blake Hammond had posted a photo on Instagram an hour earlier showing a bottle of champagne with the caption, "Celebrating New Partnerships," and a location tag for the Fairmont Hotel. This time, I didn't follow her. Instead, I went to the wine bar in Lincoln Park and waited. Tara Morrison and Monica Chen arrived at 8:30 without Julia. I watched them from a corner table, 2 women in their late 30s dressed for a night of gossip and alcohol. They ordered a bottle of Pinot Grigio and immediately started talking about their friend's situation. "She's finally going to leave him," Tara said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I told her she should have done it years ago." "Mark's not that bad," Monica replied, though her tone suggested she was playing devil's advocate rather than actually defending me. "Please. He's a glorified janitor who cleans up other people's messes. Julia deserves better. Blake's definitely better, rich, successful, and he worships her. The intimacy must be amazing. She's been glowing lately." They spent the next hour dissecting my marriage, my career, my appearance, and my general worthiness as a human being. They discussed Julia's affair in detail, including information about Blake's divorce settlement, his penthouse apartment, and his plans to take Julia to Europe once she dealt with the Mark situation. I recorded every word. When they finally left, I followed Monica to her car. She was drunk, fumbling with her keys in the parking lot behind the wine bar. "Monica," I called out. She turned, squinting at me in the dim light. "Mark? What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing. Julia said she was meeting you and Tara for girls' night. Even drunk, Monica was smart enough to realize she'd been caught in a lie. Her face went pale, and she started stammering about Julia changing her plans, maybe going home early with a headache. "She's not home," I said. "I just came from there." Monica stared at me, clearly trying to calculate how much trouble she was in and how much I actually knew. "Look, Mark, it's not my business what Julia does. You should talk to your wife." I plan to. I walked away, leaving Monica standing in the parking lot with her keys in her hand and guilt written across her face. When Julia came home at midnight, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of scotch and a folder full of evidence. "How was girls' night?" I asked. "Fine. Tara drank too much, and Monica had to drive her home early." "Funny. I saw Monica at the wine bar. She seemed surprised that you weren't there." Julia's composure slipped for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. She was good at her job, after all. "I left early. I told you I had a headache." "Where did you go?" "Home. I took a bath and went to bed." "The bed's not messed up, and the bathtub's dry." Julia stared at me, and I could see her mind working, trying to find an explanation that would satisfy me and allow her to maintain the lie that had become our marriage. "I don't like being interrogated in my own home, Mark." "Our home. And I don't like being lied to by my wife." I opened the folder and spread the contents across the coffee table. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, printed screenshots of Blake Hammond's social media posts, and photos I'd taken of Julia entering and leaving his building. Julia looked at the evidence, and I watched 8 years of marriage collapse in real time. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, anger, and finally, resignation. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Long enough." "What do you want?" The truth would be a nice start. Julia sat down across from me, and for the first time in months, she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, human, flawed. "It started 6 months ago. Blake hired our firm to handle publicity for his new development, and I was assigned to his account. He was charming, successful, everything that—" She paused, realizing she was about to say something that couldn't be taken back. "Everything that I'm not? That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." Julia started crying, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry for what she'd done. They were the tears of someone who was sorry she'd been caught. "I never meant for it to happen, Mark. But we've been drifting apart for years. You know we have. So you decided to drift into Blake Hammond's bed. Don't be crude." "I'm not being crude. I'm being accurate." I poured myself another scotch and offered her one. She shook her head. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we get divorced." "Mark, maybe we can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling." "Julia, you've been seeing another man for 6 months. You've lied to me every day, spent our money on hotels and lingerie for your lover, and conspired with your friends to make me look like a fool. What exactly do you think we're going to fix?" She flinched at my language, but I was past caring about her sensibilities. "I made a mistake." People make mistakes. Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk or missing an anniversary. This was a choice. You chose Blake Hammond over me every day for 6 months. Julia wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been respect for the first time in years. "You're not going to fight for us?" "There is no us." There hasn't been for months. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline where Blake Hammond was probably sleeping peacefully in his penthouse, unaware that his secret was no longer secret. "I'll move out tomorrow," Julia said quietly. "No need. I already found a new place." She looked surprised. "When?" 2 weeks ago. I've been planning this conversation since I found the first hotel receipt." "You've been investigating me for 2 weeks?" "I've been documenting your affair for 2 weeks. There's a difference." Julia stood up, and I could see her shifting from apologetic wife to public relations professional, calculating how to minimize the damage to her reputation and career. "What are you going to do with all this?" She gestured at the evidence on the coffee table. "Whatever I need to do." "Mark, please. Think about what this could do to my career, my relationships." "You should have thought about that before you started screwing your client." "Don't be vindictive. That's not who you are." She was wrong about that. I was discovering that vindictive was exactly who I could be when pushed far enough, You don't know who I am, Julia. If you did, you might have thought twice before betraying me. I gathered up the evidence and put it back in the folder. Julia watched me, clearly trying to figure out what I was planning. I'll have divorce papers drawn up tomorrow, I said. You can keep whatever's left in the joint accounts after I take what I'm owed. The condo's going on the market next week. You can't sell the condo without my signature. Actually, I can. It's in my name only. You might remember that your parents insisted on a prenup that kept all major assets separate. Seemed like a good idea at the time. Julia's face went white. The prenup had been her father's idea, designed to protect the Steinberg family assets from a gold-digging insurance adjuster. Now it was going to leave her with almost nothing. Where will I go? I'm sure Blake will be happy to help you figure that out. I walked toward the bedroom, then stopped and turned back to her. By the way, Tara and Monica had some very interesting things to say about you tonight, and about me. I recorded the whole conversation. Julia stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. Who are you? I'm the man you married and then decided to betray. The man you thought was too stupid or too weak to figure out what you were doing. The man you were planning to divorce after you'd secured your relationship with Blake. How did you know about your exit strategy? Lucky guess. But thank you for confirming it. I left her standing in the living room and went to pack my clothes. I'd already moved everything important to my new apartment over the past 2 weeks. All that was left were the remnants of a life I'd thought was real. The next morning, Julia was gone when I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. I'm staying with Tara until we can figure this out. Please don't do anything rash. We can handle this like adults. I laughed out loud reading it. Julia still thought she could manage this situation, spin it into something that wouldn't destroy her carefully constructed life. She was about to learn otherwise. I called Raj and asked him to meet me for lunch. We went to a sports bar near our office, the kind of place Julia would never be caught in, with cheap beer and bartenders who didn't care if you looked like you belonged in a magazine. So, Raj said after I'd filled him in on the basics, what's the plan? I'm going to destroy her. Legally? Completely legally, but thoroughly. Raj grinned. I knew there was a reason I liked you. I showed him the evidence I'd collected, including the recording of Tara and Monica's conversation. Raj listened to the whole thing, his expression getting darker with each revelation. These women are vicious, he said when it finished. They're about to find out what vicious actually looks like. What do you need from me? Help me understand Blake Hammond. You know people in real estate, right? I know people everywhere. Give me a day. That afternoon, I met with a divorce attorney named Patricia Wolfe, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of smile that suggested she enjoyed her work a little too much. This is quite a collection of evidence, Mr. Kessler, she said, reviewing my folder. Your wife wasn't very careful. She didn't think I was smart enough to catch her. Her mistake. With the prenup and this level of documentation, you should be able to keep most of your assets and avoid alimony. I want more than that. Patricia raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? I want her to lose everything that matters to her. Her reputation, her friends, her family's respect, her relationship with Blake. That's not really a legal matter, Mr. Kessler. I know. But you can make sure the legal part goes smoothly while I handle the rest. Patricia smiled, and I understood why she had a reputation for being ruthless. I think we're going to work well together. That evening, I started phase 1 of what I was already thinking of as the Julia Project. I created a group text message that included Tara, Monica, and 6 other women from Julia's social circle. Then I attached the recording from the wine bar and sent it with a simple message. Thought you might be interested in what your friends really think about you. Then I waited. My phone started ringing within minutes. The first call was from Monica, hysterical and crying. Mark, please, you have to delete that recording. Tara was drunk, we were just talking. You were talking about my wife's affair and planning her divorce strategy. That's not just talking, Monica. We weren't planning anything. We were just supporting our friend. By encouraging her to cheat on her husband? Monica started crying harder. Please don't send this to anyone else. My husband will destroy me if he hears what I said. What you said about marriage being a trap and men being disposable? Yeah, I can see how that might upset him. I hung up on her. The second call was from Tara, and she was furious rather than apologetic. You have no right to record private conversations, Mark. That's probably illegal. It's not illegal to record conversations in public places, Tara. I checked. You're trying to destroy Julia's friendships out of spite. I'm sharing information about what kind of friends Julia has. If that destroys her friendships, maybe they weren't worth having. You're pathetic. I'm effective. There's a difference. I hung up on her too. The third call was from Julia, and she was beyond furious. What the hell do you think you're doing? Sharing your friends' honest opinions about our marriage. I thought they were very illuminating. You recorded Tara and Monica without their permission. In a public place where they were discussing private details of our marriage loud enough for strangers to hear. I thought you might want to know how they really feel about you. They're my friends, Mark. They were trying to support me. By calling me a glorified janitor and discussing your personal life with Blake? That's some real support. Julia was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her breathing hard on the other end of the line. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You thought you could cheat on me, lie to me, and plan your exit strategy with your girlfriends without any repercussions. You were wrong. This isn't over. You're right. It's just getting started. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I opened a bottle of beer and started planning phase 2. The next morning, I called Blake Hammond's office and made an appointment to discuss a potential insurance claim. I used a fake name and told his secretary I was interested in coverage for a new development project. Blake Hammond was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, handsome in an artificial way, with perfect teeth and a handshake that lasted too long. His office was decorated with photos of himself at various charity events and business functions, including several where Julia appeared in the background. Mr. Johnson, he said, using the fake name I'd given his secretary, I understand you're interested in discussing insurance coverage for commercial development. Actually, I said, I'm here to discuss Julia Kessler. Blake's expression changed, instantly, from professional friendliness to something much more guarded. I'm sorry. Who are you? I'm Mark Kessler, Julia's husband. Blake stood up from behind his desk, and I could see him calculating whether he needed to call security or if he could handle one angry husband on his own. I think you should leave. I think you should sit down and listen to what I have to say. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd taken of Julia leaving his building. Nice picture, don't you think? Very clear. You can see the timestamp and location data. Blake sat down. What do you want? I want you to understand that your relationship with my wife is over. That's between Julia and me. No, it's between Julia and me. You're just the other man she's been screwing while lying to her husband. Blake's face flushed red, but he kept his voice level. Julia and I have a professional relationship. Is that what you call it? I have hotel receipts that suggest otherwise. I placed copies of the Fairmont and Peninsula receipts on his desk. Blake looked at them but didn't touch them. What do you want? He asked again. I want you to end it, today. No contact, no more meetings, no more champagne celebrations of your new partnerships. And if I don't? I smiled, and Blake actually leaned back in his chair. Then these photos, along with the hotel receipts, and some very interesting recordings of Julia's friends discussing your relationship, get sent to your business partners, your clients, and anyone else who might be interested in your professional conduct. You're blackmailing me. I'm giving you an opportunity to end this quietly before it becomes a public scandal. That's more consideration than you gave my marriage. Blake stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing his options. His development company depended on maintaining relationships with investors and clients who valued discretion and stability. A public affair with a married woman could damage his reputation and cost him millions in lost business. "Fine," he said finally. "It's over. I want to hear you say it. I'll end my relationship with Julia. All contact. Personal and professional. All contact." I stood up and collected the photos and receipts from his desk. "Pleasure doing business with you, Blake." I walked out of his office feeling better than I had in months. But I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I drove to Dr. Harold Steinberg's medical practice in Highland Park. Julia's father was a cardiologist with a successful practice and a reputation for being both brilliant and insufferably arrogant. He'd made it clear from the beginning that he considered me an unsuitable match for his daughter, and our relationship had never progressed beyond barely polite tolerance. The receptionist told me that Dr. Steinberg was with a patient, but I said I'd wait. After an hour, he emerged from his office looking exactly as he always did, perfectly dressed, perfectly groomed, and perfectly condescending. "Mark," he said, clearly surprised to see me. "What brings you here?" "I need to discuss Julia with you." His expression immediately became guarded. "Is something wrong?" "You could say that." I followed him into his office, a room decorated with medical degrees, awards, and photos of the Steinberg family at various upscale events. There was one photo of Julia and me from our wedding, relegated to a corner of his desk where it was barely visible. "What's this about?" Dr. Steinberg asked, settling behind his desk like a judge preparing to render verdict. "Julia and I are getting divorced." If he was surprised, he didn't show it. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mark. These things happen. She's been having an affair." Now he looked surprised. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact." I placed a copy of the evidence folder on his desk. Dr. Steinberg opened it and began reading, his expression growing darker with each page. "Where did you get this?" "I investigated my own wife because she was lying to me every day. These are hotel receipts, credit card statements, and photographs documenting her relationship with Blake Hammond." Dr. Steinberg continued reading, and I could see him processing the implications. The Steinberg family prided itself on respectability and social standing. A daughter who cheated on her husband and conducted a public affair was not good for the family reputation. "What do you want from me, Mark?" "I want you to know the truth about why your daughter's marriage is ending. And I want you to understand that this isn't going to be a quiet, amicable divorce. Are you threatening my family?" "I'm informing your family. Julia has been telling people that she's planning to leave me, painting herself as the victim of an unhappy marriage. I thought you should know what really happened." Dr. Steinberg closed the folder and looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You're not the man I thought you were, Mark." "No, I'm not. Your daughter discovered that too late." I stood up to leave, then turned back to him. "By the way, Julia's been using the credit card you gave her for emergencies to pay for hotels with her lover. You might want to check those statements." Dr. Steinberg's face went pale, and I knew I'd hit another target. That evening, Julia called me from Tara's house. She was crying and angry and desperate all at once. "You went to see Blake? And my father? What is wrong with you? I'm making sure everyone knows the truth about our marriage. You're trying to destroy my life. I'm revealing what you've already done to your life." There's a difference. Blake won't take my calls. He says it's over, that he can't see me anymore. Good. Maybe now you can focus on being honest with your husband. We're getting divorced, Mark. What's the point of being honest now? The point is that you owe me that much after 8 years of marriage. Julia was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me. Every day for 6 months, you looked me in the eye and lied. You made me feel like I was losing my mind, like I was paranoid and jealous for noticing that my wife was pulling away from me. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough, Julia. What would be enough? I thought about that question for a long time before answering. Nothing. There's nothing you can do to fix this. But there's plenty I can do to make sure you understand the consequences of your choices. What does that mean? It means this isn't over. I hung up and started planning phase 3. The next week, I received a call from Raj with information about Blake Hammond that was even better than I'd hoped. Your boy Blake is in trouble, Raj said. He's over-leveraged on his current project, behind on payments to contractors, and there are rumors that he's been using investor money to fund his lifestyle. How do you know all this? I told you, I know people. Blake's been trying to secure additional financing, but word is getting around that he's not a good risk. Interesting. It gets better. Apparently, he's been promising potential investors that he has connections to high-level PR and marketing support through Julia's firm. He's been using her as a selling point. I smiled. Not anymore. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Blake Hammond is about to have a very bad week. I spent the next 2 days researching Blake's business partners and investors. Then I created a detailed report documenting his affair with Julia, including the hotel receipts, photographs, and a timeline showing how he'd been using company resources to conduct a personal relationship. I mailed copies of the report to his 3 largest investors, along with a cover letter explaining that I was providing the information as a concerned citizen who believed they should know about their business partner's character and judgment. I also sent a copy to the Chicago Tribune's business reporter, along with documentation showing that Blake had been claiming a professional relationship with Julia's PR firm while conducting a personal affair that compromised both companies' reputations. Then I waited. The story broke on a Friday morning with the headline, "Developer's Affair Raises Questions About Business Ethics." The article detailed Blake's relationship with Julia, his use of company resources for personal purposes, and concerns from investors about his judgment and trustworthiness. By noon, Blake's phone was ringing off the hook with angry investors demanding explanations. By 5 o'clock, his 2 largest backers had pulled their funding from his current project. Julia called me that evening, hysterical. "You destroyed him! Blake lost everything because of you. Blake destroyed himself when he decided to have an affair with a married woman and use it to advance his business interests. He never used our relationship for business. He told investors that he had exclusive access to high-level PR support through your firm. He was selling your relationship, Julia." She was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "That's not true. It's in the Tribune article. You should read it. This is all your fault. No, this is all the consequence of your choices. You chose to have an affair. Blake chose to exploit that affair for business purposes. I just made sure people knew the truth. You're not the man I married. You're right. The man you married trusted you and believed your lies. That man doesn't exist anymore." I hung up and poured myself a scotch, but I still wasn't finished. The final phase of the Julia project began the following Monday when I received a call from Patricia Wolf. "The divorce papers are ready," she said. "But I have some interesting news." "What's that?" "Julia's attorney called this morning. Apparently, she wants to negotiate a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" "She's willing to give up any claim to the condo or your retirement accounts in exchange for your agreement not to pursue her for the money she spent on her affair." I laughed. "She thinks she's in a position to negotiate?" "Apparently. Her attorney says she has information that could be embarrassing to you if this goes to court." "What information?" "He wouldn't say. But he implied that Julia has been documenting problems in your marriage that could make you look bad in front of a judge." I thought about this for a moment. Julia was smart and ruthless when she needed to be. If she'd been planning her exit strategy for months, she might have been building a case against me at the same time she was conducting her affair. Tell her attorney that I'll consider a settlement meeting. Are you sure? We have a very strong case. I'm sure. But I want the meeting to be somewhere public, and I want to record it. That might not be legally admissible. I'm not worried about legal admissibility. I have other plans for the recording. The settlement meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday at a conference room in Patricia's law office. Julia arrived with her attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he specialized in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. Julia looked terrible. She'd lost weight, her hair was limp, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. The confident, polished woman I'd married had been replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. "Hello, Mark," she said quietly. Julia. We sat across from each other at a conference table that felt like a battlefield. Patricia and Julia's attorney, whose name was David Brennan, handled the preliminary negotiations while Julia and I stared at each other like strangers. "My client is prepared to offer a very generous settlement," Brennan said. "She'll relinquish any claim to marital assets in exchange for Mr. Kessler's agreement to keep private matters private." "What private matters?" Patricia asked. Brennan opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. "Mrs. Kessler has documented a pattern of controlling and emotionally abusive behavior that she's prepared to present in court if necessary." I looked at the documents. They included a journal that Julia claimed to have been keeping for 2 years, documenting my alleged jealousy, possessiveness, and verbal abuse. There were also statements from Tara and Monica supporting her claims about my behavior. "This is interesting fiction," I said. "It's documented evidence," Brennan replied. "Mrs. Kessler has been keeping records because she was concerned about your increasingly erratic behavior." I looked at Julia. "You wrote all this after I caught you cheating, didn't you?" She didn't answer, but her expression told me everything I needed to know. "You spent the last 2 weeks creating a fake history of our marriage to use as leverage in divorce proceedings." "That's not," she started. "It's brilliant, actually. Very thorough. But it has one major flaw." "What's that?" Brennan asked. I pulled out my own folder and placed it on the table. I have 8 years of documentation showing what our marriage was really like. The folder contained copies of emails, text messages, photos, and social media posts that painted a picture of a happy couple. Birthday cards Julia had written, telling me how much she loved me. Vacation photos where we looked genuinely happy. Messages she'd sent to friends and family talking about what a good husband I was. "This is all from before the problem started," Brennan said. "The problem started 6 months ago when Julia began her affair with Blake Hammond. Everything before that shows a normal, healthy marriage between 2 people who loved each other." I opened my laptop and showed them a video I'd compiled from our wedding, anniversaries, and various celebrations over the years. Julia appeared in dozens of clips, telling friends and family how happy she was, how much she loved me, how lucky she felt to have found such a good man. "You can't fake 8 years of happiness," I said. "But you can fake 2 weeks of abuse allegations." Julia started crying, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of frustration and rage. "You bastard," she whispered. "I'm the bastard? You cheated on me for 6 months, lied to me every day, and then tried to frame me as an abusive husband to get out of the consequences. But I'm the bastard?" Brennan looked at his client, clearly realizing that her strategy had backfired spectacularly. "Perhaps we should take a break," he suggested. "No," I said. "Let's finish this." I pulled out one more document, a settlement agreement I'd had Patricia prepare. "Here's my offer," I said. "Julia gets nothing. No money, no assets, no alimony. She pays her own legal fees and agrees never to contact me again after the divorce is finalized." "That's completely unreasonable," Brennan said. "What's unreasonable is your client's attempt to commit perjury by claiming I abused her. What's unreasonable is her affair, her lies, and her plan to destroy my reputation to cover up her own misconduct." I stood up and looked directly at Julia. You want to know what's really unreasonable? I loved you. For 8 years, I loved you completely and honestly. I worked hard to build a life with you, to make you happy, to be the husband you deserved. And you threw it all away for a man who was using you to advance his business interests. Julia looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. Mark, please. Sign the papers, Julia. Take what I'm offering and disappear from my life. I can't survive on nothing. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on your husband. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. By the way, your parents called me yesterday. They wanted to apologize for your behavior and to let me know they're cutting off your credit cards and your trust fund. Apparently, Dr. Steinberg doesn't approve of daughters who commit adultery and then lie about it. Julia's face went white. They can't do that. They can, and they did. Turns out your father has higher standards than I thought. I left the conference room and walked out of the building into the Chicago sunshine. My phone was buzzing with messages, but I ignored them. For the first time in months, I felt free. 3 days later, Julia signed the settlement agreement. She kept her personal belongings and her car, but everything else became mine. The condo sold within a week, and I used the proceeds to buy a house in a different neighborhood, far from the memories of our failed marriage. Blake Hammond's development company filed for bankruptcy 2 months later. The scandal surrounding his affair and questionable business practices made it impossible for him to secure new financing. Last I heard, he was working for someone else's company and living in a studio apartment in a part of town he would have considered beneath him a year earlier. Tara and Monica's marriages both ended in divorce after their husbands heard the recording of their wine bar conversation. It turned out that both women had been having affairs of their own, and their casual discussion of marriage as a temporary arrangement didn't sit well with their respective spouses. Julia moved to Los Angeles, where she got a job with a small PR firm that specialized in crisis management. The irony wasn't lost on me. I never saw her again, but I heard from mutual acquaintances that she'd learned some hard lessons about the consequences of betrayal. She was alone, struggling financially, and had difficulty maintaining relationships because people in her new city had heard about her reputation. As for me, I kept working in insurance, but I moved to a different company where I could start fresh. I bought a house with a big backyard, adopted a dog from the shelter, and slowly began rebuilding a life that was entirely my own. I never remarried, but I dated occasionally. I was honest with the women I met about what had happened to my marriage, and most of them understood that trust was something I'd have to learn how to give again. The Julia Project, as I'd come to think of it, had been a complete success. I'd exposed her affair, destroyed her support network, ended her relationship with Blake, cost her the respect of her family, and left her with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. Some people might say I went too far, that revenge is never the answer, that I should have taken the high road and simply divorced her quietly. Those people have never been betrayed by someone they loved completely. Julia had made a choice to destroy our marriage for her own selfish reasons. She'd lied to me, cheated on me, and then tried to destroy my reputation to cover up her own misconduct. I simply made sure that her choices had appropriate consequences. And as I sat in my new house, drinking a beer and watching my dog chase squirrels in the backyard, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even.